Morning, I realize that things may not be going all that great for a lot of us this holiday season. Unfortunately, we do live in a fallen world that a lot of times can be very harsh. And none of this unhappiness or this harshness surprises God at all. And nor is He helpless against it. As we reflect on Psalm 100, we can focus our attention on a few realities. First, the Lord is God, and He is good. Next, His mercy is everlasting, and His truth will endure to all generations. We have much to be thankful for, even in the midst of our earthly struggles. As we celebrate Thanksgiving, I think it would be only appropriate that we mention the first Thanksgiving this morning, and our guest speaker, the Reverend Raphael Cruz, spoke clearly to us about our Christian heritage and why those people came from across the sea to this land in the first place. But I want to focus just a little bit, just for a moment, on what they were going through personally when they arrived here. Think a moment for that little band of people who crossed the Atlantic Ocean in a boat that was about 26 feet by about 111 feet, and it landed on the New England coast that cold, bitter winter. At times that first year, their daily ration of those who were able to be on their feet were about 5 grains of corn. It was a custom in early New England that at Thanksgiving time that 5 kernels of corn be placed on every plate as a reminder of those stern days in the first winter when the food of the pilgrims was depleted to that small amount that's all that they could ration out. The Pilgrim Fathers wanted their children to remember the sacrifice, the suffering, and the hardships through which they had passed safely. A fitting reminder of the hardship that made it possible for the settlement of a free people in a free land. They wanted to keep alive the memory of the 63-day trip taken in the tiny Mayflower, which, by the way, as I was reading up on some history, that wasn't their first boat. Their first boat or ship, if you will, was called the Speedwell, of all things, and it leaked like a sieve. They patched it. They got in it. It was leaking. They had to turn around and go back. They patched it, set out again, for it to continue leaking, and they ended up in the Mayflower. So this trip had struggle all the way through it. And think about that for a moment, if you will. These people, called by God, wanted to worship God freely in a free land, risked their lives, and in more ways than one, to come to the shores of these United States just to be faced again with this harsh, harsh winter. And and I'm thinking to myself, and I'm sure you are too, that how this challenged their faith. Did we really make the right decision here? Did we hear God right? And if we heard God right, why is this so hard? Why is everything against us? As we read on in history, we know that about half of them perished that first winter. And there was many more that, only about 7 that were able to stay on their feet and minister to the sick that were still alive. It was a tough winter. Then on top of that, they had to work 7 years to repay London for their loan for their trip. After suffering every kind of hardship, they had a harvest of 21 acres of corn, and in the fall of 1621, in spite of all this hardship, the first thing they did when they got a break was give thanks to the Lord. They offered thanks to God for His blessings. This little group, led by Governor William Bradford, marched triumphantly through the cornfields singing, "The earth is the Lord's, and the fullness thereof, the world and they that dwell therein." They sat down to a meal in gladness and joy, and they were going to give thanks to God no matter what. Think a little bit about what that first Thanksgiving was like. They were in a strange lands. The Pilgrims and the Native Americans gathered together. We know that the Native Americans were very gracious to them and helped them out quite a bit. But in all that, I don't think they knew each other that well. And there was a language barrier, obviously. And then there was the cultural differences. The Pilgrims, again, in a new land that hasn't treated them very well, still losing and mourning the loss of friends and loved ones thousands of miles away from most of the people they did know and love, yet they give thanks to God. You see, it was their obedience to God that brought them to this new world and all the struggle that went on in it. Being in the will of God is not always easy, friends. And being in the will of God might not always be as easy and as smooth going as we might think it should be. Their journey was hard, and things did not get any easier for them upon their arrival. And in all of this, they offered up a sacrifice of thanksgiving and praise to God. And I want to suggest to us this morning that giving thanks to God may be just that, a sacrifice. Something that's not easy for us. Something you might not feel like doing. You may not feel like giving God praise. And that's why it's called a sacrifice of praise. Because there's an element of pain involved in it. Giving thanks to God. So why should we do it? Because God asks us to it. God asks it of us. And even on our worst day, we have Jesus Christ, and that's something to be thankful for.